The businessman's son had never spoken, until the garbage man became his friend and... Richard Peterson held the medical reports with trembling hands, yet another appointment that ended without answers. His 5-year-old son Timmy had remained in absolute silence since he began speaking his first words at 2 years old, when something inexplicable happened, and he simply stopped. It was that Tuesday in March when everything changed. Timmy ran to the bedroom window as he did every morning, but this time something different happened. Seeing the garbage truck approaching the mansion in the Upper East Side neighborhood of New York City, the boy pointed for the first time in years and sketched something that resembled a smile. Richard dropped the financial newspaper and ran to his son. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The boy, who hadn't shown any emotional reaction in 3 years, was timidly waving to the worker getting off the truck. The sanitation worker, a dark-skinned man of about 40, wore an orange uniform and was humming a country tune while collecting the garbage bags. "Timmy?" whispered the father, afraid to break the spell of that moment. The boy turned to him, still smiling, and waved again to the worker. It was the first time Richard had seen that spark of interest in anything in his son's eyes. Marcus Robert Johnson, known to everyone as Marky, had worked as a sanitation worker for 15 years. That morning, while collecting trash from house number 247, he noticed the little blonde boy in the window. Without thinking twice, he waved back and gave a warm smile. He had no idea he had just provoked the child's first communicative gesture in years. "Hi, little one. Good morning," shouted Marky, pausing his work for a moment. Timmy waved his little hand with more enthusiasm, pressing his little face against the window glass. Richard watched the scene in disbelief. He had spent a fortune on neurologists, psychologists, speech therapists, and nothing had worked. Now, a simple sanitation worker was getting a reaction he thought impossible. The businessman felt a mixture of relief and embarrassment. How could he explain to his country club friends that his son responded better to a sanitation worker than to the best specialists in the country? His wife, Cynthia, had abandoned the family 2 years earlier, leaving only a note saying she couldn't handle the pressure of having a different child anymore. In the following days, Timmy would run to the window as soon as he heard the sound of the garbage truck approaching. It was always at the same time, 7:30 in the morning, when Marky passed by the street. The sanitation worker had noticed the boy's interest and always gave a special little wave before moving on to the next house. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Mrs. Nelson, the housekeeper who had cared for Timmy since he was a baby, watched the boy's transformation with joy. "Dr. Richard, did you see how different Timmy is?" she commented one Thursday morning. "Ever since he started seeing that garbage man, he seems more present." Richard huffed, adjusting his Italian tie before heading out for another day of meetings at the consulting firm he'd inherited from his father. "Nancy, I don't want you encouraging my son's fantasies. He needs to focus on medical treatment, not waste time with this nonsense." "But doctor, it's not nonsense. The boy is reacting for the first time in years," insisted the housekeeper, a 60-year-old woman who had raised 3 children of her own. "So what? It's just a phase. Soon he'll forget and we'll be back to normal." But Richard was mistaken. With each passing day, Timmy grew more anxious waiting for the truck's arrival. He began waking up earlier, eating breakfast without resistance, and even dressing himself, things that had previously been a daily struggle. Marky had also noticed the boy's regularity at the window. He began setting aside small, colorful objects he found in the recyclable trash, bottle caps, pieces of shiny paper, small broken toys, to show the boy. Whenever he passed by the house, he would hold up one of these treasures high, making Timmy clap his little hands. "Look at this, champ," Marky would shout, showing a red bottle cap. "Today, I found this one special for you." And the boy would respond with increasingly excited waves. Sometimes he would stay at the window even after the truck had passed, as if waiting for it to return. The turning point happened on a rainy Friday. Timmy waited at the window as always, but the truck didn't appear at the usual time. 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30, nothing. The boy began to get agitated, walking back and forth across the room, something he hadn't done in months. "Calm down, Timmy," Nancy tried to soothe him. It must be because of the rain, my love." But the boy wouldn't calm down. At 9 in the morning, when Richard had already left for work, Timmy had his first nervous breakdown in years. He began crying desperately, hitting his little hands on the window and making incomprehensible sounds. Nancy was terrified. She immediately called Richard, who was in an important meeting with Japanese investors. "Doctor, you need to come home right now. Timmy is having a terrible episode." "Nancy, I'm in a meeting that could define the company's future. Give him a sedative and we'll talk later." "Doctor, it's not like that. He's asking for the garbage man, I'm sure of it." Richard sighed, irritated. "That's absurd, Nancy. He doesn't even speak. How could he be asking for anything? He's pointing to the street and crying as if he's lost his best friend in the world." That phrase hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. He apologized to the Japanese investors and ran out of the company. During the entire trip back home, he couldn't get the housekeeper's words out of his head, as if he's lost his best friend in the world. When he arrived home, he found Timmy on the bedroom floor, hugging a drawing he had made. It was a colorful scribble that clearly represented a truck and a human figure. The boy was crying softly, holding the paper against his chest. Richard knelt beside his son, not knowing what to do. He had never handled the boy's emotions well, always leaving that part to Cynthia or Nancy. "Son," he whispered, lightly touching Timmy's shoulder. The boy looked at his father with eyes red from crying and, for the first time in years, tried to say something. Only incomprehensible sounds came out, but Richard could feel the urgency in his son's voice. "Do you miss the garbage truck man?" asked the father, feeling ridiculous for having this conversation. Timmy nodded vigorously, leaving Richard even more confused. How could a child who didn't speak understand such complex questions? At that moment, the house phone rang. Nancy answered in the kitchen and soon came running to the room. "Doctor, it's a man asking if everything is all right with the boy at the window. He says he's the sanitation worker." Richard turned red with shame and anger at the same time. How presumptuous! How did this man get our number? He says he asked Mrs. Miller from next door, that she gave him the number because he was worried about the boy. Tell him we don't need his concern and hang up the phone. But Timmy had an immediate reaction. He got up from the floor and ran to Nancy, pulling on her skirt hem and making desperate sounds. "Doctor, I think the boy wants to talk to him," said Nancy, covering the phone's mouthpiece. "That's ridiculous. My son is not going to talk to a sanitation worker." "But doctor, hang up that phone right now." Nancy obeyed reluctantly, but Timmy had a reaction that surprised everyone. For the first time in his life, he threw a tantrum. He threw himself on the floor, kicked his legs, and screamed guttural sounds that clearly expressed frustration and anger. Richard was paralyzed. In recent years, his son had always been apathetic, quiet, distant. Seeing him display such intense emotions was both frightening and comforting. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Timmy's meltdown lasted the rest of the day. He refused to eat, to bathe, or to do anything. He sat by the window, waiting for the truck that wouldn't return until Monday. Richard cancelled all his weekend appointments and watched his son trying to understand what was happening. On Saturday morning, Timmy woke up and ran to the window as usual, but upon realizing it wasn't a trash collection day, he went back to bed and covered himself with the sheet. Richard approached slowly. "Son, the garbage truck man only works Monday through Friday. On the weekend he rests, like Daddy." Timmy looked at him from under the sheet, and Richard got the impression that the boy had perfectly understood what he said. "He'll be back on Monday, okay?" The boy nodded slightly and stayed in bed the rest of the day. Nancy was worried because he barely ate anything. "Doctor, this isn't normal. A child shouldn't get so attached to a stranger." "I think it's strange too, Nancy. I'll call Dr. Harold on Monday. Maybe we need to increase his medication dosage." "Doctor, with all due respect, but medication won't fix this. The boy is trying to communicate in his own way. For the first time in years, he's showing what he feels." Richard knew Nancy was right, but he couldn't accept that a sanitation worker had achieved something that he, with all his money and resources, had not. On Sunday, while having coffee alone on the balcony, Richard watched his son playing in the garden for the first time in months. Timmy had picked up some small stones and was arranging them in rows, as if they were houses on a street. Then he took a toy car and started moving it from one house to another, making engine sounds. "He's imitating the garbage truck," Richard murmured to himself. At that moment, an old memory came to his mind. As a child, he also had a special connection with the milkman who came to his parents' house. He always woke up early to see him arrive on his bicycle, and the man always gave him a little piece of cheese. His mother, a simple woman who was proud of her working-class husband, never saw a problem with it. But when Richard grew up and inherited his father-in-law's company, he learned that there were social differences that should be respected. He learned that a millionaire businessman didn't mingle with manual laborers. He learned that these divisions were necessary to maintain social order. Now watching his son play at being a sanitation worker, Richard questioned whether he had learned the wrong things. Monday arrived with a radiant sun. Timmy woke up before the alarm and ran to the window at 7 in the morning. Richard decided to stay home to observe his son's reaction when the truck arrived. At 7:30 on the dot, the familiar sound of the diesel engine echoed down the street. Timmy started clapping before he even saw the vehicle. When the truck appeared on the corner, the boy became euphoric, jumping for joy in front of the window. Marky got down from the truck and immediately looked toward the window. Upon seeing the boy, his face lit up in a broad smile. "Hi, champ. I missed you," he shouted, waving with both hands. Timmy responded with frantic waves, pressing both his little hands against the glass. Marky laughed and pulled from his pocket a little golden bottle cap he had saved especially. "Look what treasure I brought for you today." The boy clapped his hands and made joyful sounds Richard had never heard before. It was as if his son had found a dear friend after a long separation. Marky worked in front of the house for a few extra minutes, always looking toward the window and talking to the boy as if he could hear him. "Tomorrow I'll bring a special surprise for you, okay?" he said, before climbing into the truck to continue his route. Timmy kept waving until the vehicle disappeared from view, and only then did he move away from the window. Richard watched everything with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was happy to see his son showing emotions. On the other, he felt diminished for not being able to provoke the same reactions. That afternoon, Richard called Dr. Harold Anderson, the pediatric neurologist who had been following Timmy since he was 3 years old. "Doctor, I need to speak with you about my son. He's having strange reactions." "What kind of reactions, Richard?" "He's interacting with the sanitation worker who passes by our house. He waves, smiles, gets agitated when the man doesn't appear." "That's wonderful. This is the first time you've reported spontaneous social behavior from Timmy." "But doctor, it's not normal for a child to become so attached to a stranger." "Richard, let's take it easy. Any progress is welcome. You said he shows emotions when he sees this worker." "Yes, he gets excited. He even had a meltdown when the man didn't show up on Friday." "Interesting. It might be that this person has some characteristic that sparks your son's interest. Maybe the routine, maybe the way he behaves. Children with Timmy's profile sometimes connect with people in ways we can't fully explain. Do you think I should allow this friendship? Richard, your son spent 3 years practically not reacting to anything or anyone. If this man can awaken some response, I'd say it's a gift, obviously within safe boundaries." "What boundaries?" "Observation from a distance is perfect. If there's an opportunity for closer interaction, as long as you're present and feel comfortable, it could be beneficial. But don't force anything, let it happen naturally." Richard hung up more confused than before. The doctor was telling him to allow something that went against all his protective instincts and social prejudice. That night he watched Timmy during dinner. The boy ate all his food without resistance and even tried to use his fork by himself, something he hadn't done in months. After his bath, instead of staying apathetic in his room, he organized his little toys in rows and played with his truck until bedtime. On Tuesday, Richard decided to run a test. He arrived later at the office to observe the interaction between his son and the sanitation worker. He hid behind the living room curtains from where he could see the window of Timmy's room. At 7:30, the truck appeared as always. Timmy was waiting at the window, and Marky greeted him with his usual enthusiasm. But this time, the sanitation worker did something different. He pulled from his pocket a little colorful paper airplane and made it fly through the air for the boy. Timmy was ecstatic. He clapped his hands and tried to imitate the flying motion with his little hands. Marky repeated the game several times, always making the little airplane fly toward the window. "This is for you, champ. One day you'll get to play with it up close," shouted the sanitation worker. Richard felt a tightening in his chest. There was genuine affection in that man's voice, a tenderness that seemed natural and spontaneous. There was no financial interest or ulterior motives. It was simply an adult who had become enchanted with a special child. After the truck departed, Richard went up to his son's room. Timmy was sitting on his bed, still looking out the window. "Did you like the paper airplane, son?" The boy looked at his father and nodded positively. Then he pointed to the window and made hand gestures, clearly trying to imitate the flight of the paper. "Do you want to play paper airplane with Daddy?" Timmy hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. Richard took a sheet of paper from the table and tried to make a paper airplane, but his hands were shaking from nervousness. It had been years since he had played with his son. The paper airplane came out crooked and could barely fly. Timmy looked disappointed, and Richard felt like a total failure as a father. He couldn't even get a simple game right. "Sorry, son. Daddy isn't very good at these things." Timmy approached and lightly touched his father's hand. It was the first voluntary physical contact between them in over a year. Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. "Do you want Daddy to try again?" The boy nodded, and Richard made another paper airplane. This one flew a little better, and Timmy smiled timidly. Father and son spent the whole morning trying to make paper airplanes, and for the first time in years, Richard completely forgot about work. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. On Wednesday, something unexpected happened. When the garbage truck arrived, Marky didn't get out immediately. He stayed in the cab for a few minutes, talking to someone on his cell phone. Timmy waited anxiously at the window, and Richard could see the boy was getting worried. Finally, Marky got out of the truck, but not with his usual smile. He looked worried, tired. Still, he waved to Timmy and tried to smile, but the child sensed something was different. Instead of playing or showing some colorful object, Marky just quickly collected the trash and moved on. Timmy was restless the rest of the day, going back to the window several times as if expecting the truck to return. During dinner, Nancy mentioned she had spoken with Mrs. Miller, the neighbor. "Doctor, Mrs. Miller said the garbage man asked about Timmy again. It seems he's also grown fond of the boy." What else did she say? That he seems like a very good person. He always greets everyone, helps the elderly ladies with their heavy trash bags. Mrs. Miller said he has a young daughter too. Richard was surprised by this information. He had never thought of the sanitation worker as a person with his own family, his own problems, his own life. To him, he was just the garbage truck man. Did Mrs. Miller say anything else? She said he seemed worried today, that his little daughter isn't well. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the possibility that Marky's different behavior was because he was also suffering from family problems. For the first time, he saw the sanitation worker as a complete human being, not just someone providing a service. On Thursday, Timmy waited at the window as usual, but when the truck arrived, Marky wasn't driving. It was another man, older, who barely looked at the window. Timmy was confused, looking for his friend and making questioning sounds. Richard realized he needed to do something. He went down to the street and approached the truck. "Excuse me, where is the young man who usually works this route?" The older sanitation worker looked at him suspiciously. "Marky? Had to miss today. His daughter is in the hospital." "In the hospital? Is it serious?" "I don't know. I just know he was very nervous yesterday and asked to swap work days with me." Richard returned home with a heavy heart. He went up to his son's room and found him still at the window, clearly waiting for Marky to appear from somewhere. "Son, the truck guy can't come today. His little girl is sick in the hospital." Timmy looked at his father with a worried expression Richard had never seen before. It was as if the boy understood perfectly what it meant, for someone to be sick in the hospital. At that moment, Richard made a decision that would change everything. He picked up the phone and called Mrs. Miller. "Mrs. Miller, could you give me the phone number or address of the garbage guy? I'd like to know how his daughter is doing." "Of course, Dr. Richard. How kind of you. Let me get it here." A few minutes later, Richard had Marky's address. He lived in a simple house in the East Bronx neighborhood, in the eastern part of New York City. Richard had never set foot in that part of the city. He put on some simpler clothes and left home without telling anyone. The car ride took over an hour in traffic. As he moved away from the upscale neighborhoods, Richard felt more and more uncomfortable. The streets were narrower, the houses simpler, the activity different. When he arrived at the address, he found a small but well-kept house. There was a garden in front with colorful flowers and a blue-painted gate. Richard hesitated before knocking on the door. What was he doing there? How would he explain his presence? Before he could change his mind, the door opened. Marky appeared, dressed in casual clothes, visibly tired. "Sir, can I help you?" I'm the father of the boy in the window. Timmy." Marky's face immediately lit up. "You're Timmy's father?" "Wow, what a surprise. Please come in." Richard entered the simple house, observing the old but clean furniture, the walls decorated with family photos and children's drawings. It was a welcoming home, full of love. "How did you know where I live?" "The neighbor, Mrs. Miller. I heard your daughter is sick and, well, my son missed you today. I was worried." Marky smiled, but his eyes were red from tiredness. "That's very kind of you, doctor. My little Isabella has been in the hospital since yesterday. She was born with some minor heart problems and sometimes has episodes. Is it serious?" "The doctors say it's not very serious, but to me, she's all I have. Her mother passed away during childbirth, so it's just the two of us." Richard felt a lump in his throat. That simple man was going through the same fear he had felt when Timmy was born with complications. Can I do anything to help?" Marky looked at him surprised. "You're very kind, but you don't need to worry. Isabella will be fine. She's a little fighter, just like Timmy." "What do you mean, just like Timmy?" "Oh, doctor, your son is a very special boy. He may not speak, but I see a strength, a light in his eyes. My Isabella also doesn't speak much because of her problems, but she has that same light." Richard was moved. He had never thought of his son as someone strong. He always saw him as fragile, broken, limited. "Marky, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, doctor." "Why do you always wave to my son? Why do you care about him?" Marky smiled affectionately. "You know, doctor, when you have a special child, you learn to see things in a different way. Your little girl is the same age as Timmy and also doesn't speak much. Since she was tiny, she's been looking at me with those curious little eyes, just like Timmy does from the window." "And that doesn't bother you?" "Bother me? On the contrary, it's the best part of my day." Seeing his smile, the joy when he sees me, he sees. "It reminds me of my Isabella when she's well. It makes me think that in the world there are other special children like her, and that they all deserve affection." Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. He had never seen his son the way Marky saw him. Do you think Timmy is a normal child?" "Doctor, your son may be different, but he's not less than anyone. He's just different. And different can be very special." At that moment, Marky's cell phone rang. It was from the hospital. "Hello? How is Isabella?" Marky turned pale as he listened. "I understand. I'll be right there." He hung up the phone with trembling hands. "I have to go back to the hospital. Her blood pressure has gone up again. Can I give you a ride?" "You don't have to." "I insist. It's the least I can do." During the ride to the hospital, Marky told him more about his daughter. Isabella was 5 years old, the same age as Timmy, and had been born with a heart defect. The doctor said she would need an expensive surgery when she got older, and Marky was working 2 jobs to save up money. "During the week I do garbage collection, and on weekends I work at an auto repair shop. It's tough, but it's for her." Richard was impressed by the man's dedication. While he complained about working just 5 days a week in his air-conditioned office, Marky worked 7 days to care for his sick daughter. At the hospital, Richard met Isabella. She was a small girl, very pale, but with bright eyes and a sweet smile. When she saw her father, her little eyes lit up. "Daddy," she said in a weak voice. "Hi, my princess. How are you?" "Better now that you're here." Isabella spoke little and slowly, but when she did, it was with great affection. Richard watched the interaction between father and daughter and felt a twinge of envy. Marky and Isabella communicated through looks, caresses, and small gestures. It was exactly what he wished he had with Timmy. "Isabella, this is Dr. Richard. He's the father of a very special boy you'll meet one day." The girl looked at Richard curiously. "Is he friends with Daddy?" "We're becoming friends," replied Richard, surprising himself. While Marky spoke with the doctor, Richard stayed by Isabella's side. The girl took a sheet of paper and some colored pencils that were on the table next to the bed. "Want to draw with me, mister?" "I'm not very good at drawing." "You don't have to be good, it's just for fun." Isabella began drawing a colorful truck, and Richard tried to draw a house next to it. His lines were stiff and geometric, very different from the girl's free and cheerful strokes. "Mister, why is your house so perfect?" "What do you mean?" "A real house isn't all perfect like that. It has flowers in the garden, crooked trees, little birds flying." Isabella took the pencils and began fixing Richard's drawing, adding elements that made the house more alive, more human. "There, now it looks like a house where happy people live." Richard looked at the drawing and for the first time understood what the therapists always said about stimulating Timmy's creativity. He was so focused on technical exercises and medical protocols that he had forgotten his son was just a child who needed to play. When Marky returned from speaking with the doctor, he seemed more relieved. "Her blood pressure has normalized. She might be discharged tomorrow." "That's great. Does that mean you'll go back to work?" "If she's discharged, yes, otherwise I'll have to take another day off." "And if you take the day off, do you lose the day's pay?" "I do, but what can I do? Isabella is more important." Richard thought about that. Marky was paid by the day, unlike him who had a fixed salary regardless of occasional absences. Each missed day meant less money for his daughter's treatment. "Marky, can I say something?" "Of course, doctor. If you need to take any more days off because of Isabella, I can help compensate you financially. It's the least I can do after all the joy you brought to my son." "No, doctor, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, it's gratitude. You brought my son's smile back, that's priceless." Marky was moved but shook his head. "Doctor, you're very generous, but I've always managed on my own. I don't want you to think I got close to Timmy out of self-interest. I know it wasn't self-interest. That's exactly why I want to help. You did it from the heart, and I want to repay you from the heart too." That night, Richard returned home with his head full of thoughts. He found Timmy still awake, waiting by his bedroom window. When the boy saw his father, he ran to him with anxious eyes. "Son, I went to visit the truckman. His little girl is sick, but she's going to be okay." Timmy seemed to understand and grew calmer. Richard sat on the bed next to his son. "You know, son, I met Isabella today. She's a very special girl, just like you." Timmy tilted his head, paying attention. "She likes to draw, just like you. And you know what she taught me? That houses look prettier when they have flowers and little birds." Richard grabbed paper and pencils and started drawing with his son. This time, instead of trying to make everything perfect, he let his creativity flow. He drew crooked trees, colorful clouds, flying birds. Timmy was enchanted. He took a red pencil and started adding details to his father's drawing. For the first time, they were truly playing together. "Tomorrow the truckman will come back, son. And I promise we'll figure out a way for you to get to know each other better." Timmy looked at his father with hope in his eyes, and for the first time in years, fell asleep, smiling. On Friday, Richard woke up early and waited with his son by the window. At 7:30 sharp, the garbage truck appeared on the corner. Marky was driving, and when he saw Timmy in the window, his face lit up with joy. "Hey, champ, I missed you yesterday." Timmy waved enthusiastically, and this time Richard waved too. Marky was surprised to see the boy's father greeting him, but smiled and waved back. Good morning, Dr. Richard. Good morning, Marky. How is Isabella? Much better. Last night she was already playing again. That's wonderful. Timmy was worried when you didn't come. Marky looked at the boy with affection. Is that right, champ? You missed me? Timmy nodded vigorously, and Marky pulled a folded drawing from his pocket. Look what Isabella made for you. It's a drawing. He opened the paper and showed a colourful drawing of two boys playing. Underneath was written in crooked letters, "For my new friend, Timmy." Timmy was overjoyed, clapping his hands and making happy sounds. Richard hurried downstairs and went out to the street to get the drawing. Thank you so much, Marky. Timmy will love it. Isabella insisted. She said she wanted to meet the boy in the window. And who knows, maybe one day that can happen. Marky smiled but said nothing. It was a possibility he didn't dare imagine. Over the weekend, Timmy wouldn't part with Isabella's drawing. He carried the paper everywhere, and whenever anyone asked what it was, he showed it off proudly. Richard realized it was the first time his son had shown he had a personal treasure. On Saturday afternoon, Richard made a brave decision. He called Marky. Marky, would you and Isabella like to come over for lunch this Sunday? There was silence on the other end of the line. Doctor, are you sure it's a very fine house? I'm sure. Timmy would love to meet Isabella in person. And Isabella is dying to meet him too. It's just... Doctor, we're simple people. We don't want to cause any embarrassment. Marky, you're our friends. Friends don't cause embarrassment. And so that Sunday in April would become the most important day in the lives of Timmy and Richard. At 11 in the morning, the doorbell rang. Nancy went to answer it and found Marky and Isabella at the door. The sanitation worker wore his best shirt, and the little girl wore a simple but clean yellow dress. Good morning, Mrs. Nelson. We came for lunch. Come in, you're welcome. Timmy was in the living room with Richard when he heard unfamiliar voices. He ran to the door and stopped when he saw Marky. It was the first time he saw his friend outside the garbage truck, up close, inside his home. The boy became shy for a moment, hiding behind his father's legs. But when he saw Isabella, his eyes widened with curiosity. Hi, Timmy, said Isabella in her sweet voice. I'm Isabella. My daddy always talks about you. Timmy slowly came out from behind his father and approached the girl. The two looked at each other for a moment, studying one another. Did you like my drawing? Asked Isabella. Timmy nodded yes and ran to his room to get the paper. When he returned, he proudly showed it to her, and she clapped her hands with joy. You kept it. That's so cool. From that moment on, the two children became inseparable. Isabella was more talkative and took the lead in their games, but Timmy participated actively, communicating through gestures and expressions. During lunch, Richard observed how Marky raised his daughter with affection but firmness. The girl ate properly, said, "Excuse me," and thanked. They were simple people but with solid values. Marky, can I ask you a question? Of course, Doctor. How do you manage to have Isabella be so well-mannered and communicative? Doctors always tell me that special needs children have social difficulties. Doctor, I've learned that a special needs child is just like a normal child. They need love, boundaries, and patience. The difference is that we have to have more patience and find different ways to communicate. Different ways? For example, when Isabella was hospitalized as a little one and couldn't speak because of the machines, I invented a code with eye blinks. One blink meant yes, two meant no. Later, we kept inventing other signs. Richard was fascinated. He had never thought about creating communication codes with Timmy. And did it work? Yes, it did. Today she speaks, but we still use our secret signs when she's tired or when we're far from each other. At that moment, Isabella approached Timmy and began making some hand gestures. The boy watched attentively and tried to imitate. It was the first time someone had tried to establish visual communication with him. What is she doing? Asked Richard. She invented her own sign language, explained Marky, smiling. That gesture means friend. She's teaching it to Timmy. Timmy tried to repeat the gesture, and Isabella clapped, celebrating. Then she taught other signs. Play. Happy. Thank you. Richard was moved to see how quickly his son learned the signs. It was as if Timmy had been thirsty for a way to communicate and had finally found it. After lunch, the children played in the garden while the adults talked on the porch. Richard took the opportunity to learn more about Marky's story. "Have you always worked as a sanitation worker?" "No, doctor. Before I was a mechanic at a big garage. I earned well, had health insurance, those things. But when Isabella was born and her mother passed away, I needed a job with more flexible hours to take care of her." "And you became a sanitation worker?" "It's an honest job, doctor, and it allows me to be home when she needs me. At the garages, sometimes I had to work overtime, work weekends. Now I finish at 2 in the afternoon and can pick her up from school." "Don't you miss the garage?" "Sometimes I miss the paycheck," laughed Marky. "But I don't miss being away from my daughter. Money we can get another way, but lost time with our children never comes back." Those words hit Richard like a punch. How many times had he chosen to stay at the office instead of spending time with Timmy? How many dinners had he missed because of unnecessary meetings? "Marky, can I ask you another personal question?" "Of course." "Have you never thought about getting married again? So Isabella could have a mother?" Marky grew serious for a moment. "I have thought about it, yes. But it's hard to find someone who will accept a special needs child. Most people get scared when they find out about her challenges. And I won't accept anyone who doesn't love my daughter the way she deserves. And isn't it lonely? Sometimes it is. But Isabella brings me so much joy that it makes up for it. And now I have you all as friends too." At that moment, Timmy came running to Richard, and for the first time in his life, pulled his father's hand to show him something. He led him to the garden, where he had arranged small stones in the shape of a heart together with Isabella. "Look, Daddy," said Isabella. "Timmy helped me make a heart for you and for my dad." Richard knelt beside the children and hugged his son. Timmy didn't resist the hug like he used to. On the contrary, he returned the affection spontaneously. "Thank you so much, son. It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received." When it was time for Marky and Isabella to leave, Timmy looked visibly sad. He held the girl's hand and made the sign she had taught him for friend. "I'm your friend too, Timmy," replied Isabella. "We'll see each other again, okay?" Timmy looked at his father hopefully, and Richard smiled. "Of course we'll see each other again. You're always welcome here." That night, after Timmy fell asleep, Richard kept thinking about the afternoon they had spent. For the first time in years, his house had been filled with laughter, play, and genuine affection. He realized he had learned more about his own son in one afternoon than in years of expensive therapy. Timmy didn't need to be fixed. He needed to be understood, accepted, and loved as he was. On Monday, when the garbage truck passed by, the interaction was different. Marky was no longer just the garbage man, but a family friend. Timmy waved enthusiastically and made some of the signs Isabella had taught him. "Good morning, friends," shouted Marky. "Isabella sends a kiss." Timmy blew a kiss back and made the sign for thank you. Richard went down to the street to chat briefly with Marky. "How is Isabella?" "Great. She wouldn't stop talking about you all yesterday. She wants to know when she's coming back here." "How about next weekend?" "That would be wonderful. But, Doctor, I wanted to talk to you about something." "Of course. Yesterday, after we got home, Isabella asked me a question that got me thinking." "What question?" "She asked why Timmy doesn't go to school like she does. I didn't know how to answer." Richard was speechless. Timmy had never attended a regular school. He had private lessons at home with specialized teachers, but he had never spent time with other children. "I never thought about that. I assumed it would be too hard for him." "Doctor, I'm sorry if I'm sticking my nose where it doesn't belong, but yesterday I saw Timmy playing with Isabella, and he communicated just fine. Maybe he just needs a chance." Those words echoed in Richard's head all day. Had he deprived his son of the chance to make friends out of fear and prejudice? That afternoon, he called Dr. Harold. "Doctor, I need to talk to you about school for Timmy." "That's a great idea, Richard. It's about time we considered it. Do you think he's ready?" "From what you've told me about his interaction with your friend's son, I'd say yes. Children develop much better when they spend time with other children." "But what if the other students reject him? What if the other parents don't accept him?" Richard, you're going to have to face these challenges sooner or later. Timmy can't live in a bubble forever. What kind of school would you recommend? There are excellent inclusive schools in New York City, places where special needs children study alongside typical children. It's beneficial for everyone. That night, Richard talked with Timmy about the possibility of going to school. The boy seemed interested and made the sign Isabella had taught him for happy. During the rest of the week, Richard researched inclusive schools. He visited 3 different institutions and was impressed with the methodology. They were places where differences were celebrated, not hidden. Over the weekend, when Marky and Isabella came back for lunch, Richard shared his discoveries. "Isabella, tell Timmy what school is like." "It's really cool," said the girl enthusiastically. "There are lots of kids to play with, nice teachers, and we learn new things every day." Timmy listened attentively, and Richard noticed the growing interest in his son's eyes. "And are the other kids nice to you?" asked Richard. "Most are. Some didn't understand at first why I speak slowly, but they're used to it now. And I have a special friend, Mandy, who also has heart problems like me." "See, Timmy," said Marky. "At school you'll meet other special kids like you two." Timmy made the sign for want and pointed to the door as if he wanted to go to school right then. Everyone laughed at the boy's eagerness. "Easy, son. First, we need to choose the right school for you." In the following weeks, Richard took Timmy to visit the schools he had selected. At the 3rd school, the boy had a special reaction. As soon as they entered the playground, he let go of his father's hand and ran to where some children were playing hide-and-seek. The children stopped playing when they saw Timmy approaching. A girl about 6 years old stepped forward. "Hi, do you want to play with us?" Timmy nodded positively and waited to see what would happen. "But you don't talk?" asked a boy. Timmy shook his head and made some hand gestures. "That's so cool you talk with your hands," said the girl. "I'm Sophie. What's your name?" Timmy pointed to himself and then made gestures that clearly represented his name. "Timmy?" ventured Sophie. He nodded excitedly, and all the children applauded as if they had cracked a secret code. "Come on, Timmy, you can hide behind the tree." And just like that, naturally, Timmy was included in the game. Richard watched from a distance, emotional, while speaking with the educational coordinator. "See how the children accepted your son naturally," commented the educator. "They don't have the prejudices we adults sometimes have." "It's amazing. I was so afraid he would be rejected." Children are much more open than we imagine. Of course, there will be difficult moments, but with proper support, Timmy will develop very well here. When the visit ended, Timmy didn't want to leave. He made the sign for sad when Richard said they needed to go. "Don't be sad, son. If you want, you can study here starting next month." Timmy made the sign for happy and spontaneously hugged his father. The enrollment was completed the following week. Richard chose a school in the same neighborhood where Isabella studied, so the two could meet during breaks. When Marky heard the news, he was moved. "Doctor, you're doing the right thing. Kids need to be around other kids. I'm nervous, Marky. What if it doesn't work out?" "It will work out. Timmy is a special boy, and now other people will be able to see that too." The first day of school arrived on a sunny Monday in June. Richard woke up more nervous than his own son. Timmy was anxious, but it was a good kind of anxiety, full of anticipation. During breakfast, the boy ate everything without resistance and even asked for seconds. He was clearly preparing for an important day. "Son, if you don't like the school, you can let me know, and I'll come pick you up, okay?" Timmy made the sign for no and then for happy, making it clear he wanted to stay at school. The drive to school was quiet. Richard drove, thinking about all his fears. What if Timmy had a meltdown? What if the other children were cruel? What if the teachers didn't know how to handle him? But when they arrived at the school, Timmy got out of the car excitedly. He saw Sophie, the girl he had met during the visit, and waved to her. Sophie ran to him smiling. "Timmy, you came. That's so cool. Come on, I'll show you our classroom." And so, hand in hand with a new friend, Timmy entered the school. Richard stood still at the gate, watching his son walk away without looking back. It was the first time that had ever happened. "Hard, isn't it?" said a voice behind him. Richard turned and saw an elegant woman, about 40 years old. "Very," he admitted. "I'm Sophie's mother. My name is Helen. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about your son since last week." "Really?" "She said he's the coolest boy she's ever met, that he talks with his hands and has beautiful eyes." Richard smiled, moved. "Sophie seems like a very special girl too." "She really is. She's always been one to include everyone in games. I think your son has found a good friend." All day long, Richard couldn't concentrate on work. He kept imagining how Timmy was doing, if he was managing to communicate, if he was happy. At 4 in the afternoon, he arrived at the school to pick up his son. Timmy came running to him, clearly happy. He carried a colourful drawing and several papers in his hands. "How was it, son?" Timmy made the sign for very happy and showed the drawing. It was a picture with several people holding hands, and in the centre it said, "My friends." "The teacher explained to me that Timmy made friends with almost the whole class," said a young woman who approached. "I'm Teacher Anna. Your son is truly special." "Did he behave well?" "Very well. He's a polite, affectionate, and very intelligent child. He picked up our routine quickly and participated in all the activities." "And communication?" At first the children were a little puzzled, but they soon started to understand his gestures. And look what happened. The teacher showed a paper where several children had drawn hand signs next to words. They created a list of Timmy's signs to be able to talk to him. It was their own idea. Richard was moved. He never imagined other children would try so hard to communicate with his son. "And tomorrow, will he come back?" "Of course. The children are already planning games to include Timmy." On the way back home, Timmy wouldn't stop making signs, clearly trying to tell about his day. Richard stopped at traffic lights and tried to understand what his son was saying. "Did you play?" he asked, and Timmy made the sign for yes. "Did you make friends?" Sign for yes again. "Are you happy?" Sign for very happy. At home, Nancy was moved to see the boy so excited. "How was it, my love?" Timmy ran to her and hugged her, then showed all the drawings and papers he had brought from school. "How wonderful! You did all this?" Timmy nodded and made gestures explaining each drawing. Nancy didn't understand all the signs, but she could see the joy on the boy's face. "Dr. Richard, I've never seen Timmy so happy." "It's true. I think we've finally found his place." That night, when Richard went to say goodnight to his son, he found Timmy carefully organizing all the school papers in a little folder. It was the first time he had shown special care for objects. "Good evening, son. Tomorrow you go back to school." Timmy made the happy sign and hugged his father. Then he took a piece of paper and started drawing. He drew a big figure and a small one holding hands, and below it wrote in crooked letters, "Me and Daddy." Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. It was the first time Timmy had made a drawing, including the two of them together. "I love you very much, son." Timmy made a heart with his hands and pointed to his father. It was his way of saying, "I love you too." The following weeks were pure joy. Timmy adapted completely to school and made new friends every day. Sophie became his special friend, and the two were inseparable. Other children also approached, curious about Timmy's different way of communicating. He taught them some signs, and they invented games that included gestures. The most surprising thing was when Teacher Anna called Richard on a Thursday. "Mr. Richard, I have some wonderful news to share." "What happened?" "Today, during class, Timmy tried to speak." "What do you mean?" "He was playing with Sophie when she got hurt. Timmy got very worried and suddenly said very softly, 'Sophie?' It was the first word we heard from him. Richard almost dropped the phone from excitement. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." And that wasn't all. When she answered that she was okay, he said, "Good. My God, after so many years." "Mr. Richard, social interaction is doing wonders for your son. He's discovering he can communicate in many ways." That afternoon, when Richard went to pick up Timmy, he could hardly contain his anxiety. "Son, the teacher told me you spoke today." Timmy smiled shyly and waved. "Can you say Daddy for me?" The boy hesitated, then whispered softly, "Da, Di." Richard knelt down and hugged his son, crying with emotion. It was the moment he had waited for years. "I love you, Timmy." "Love, Daddy," the boy replied, still softly but clearly. From that day on, Timmy began to speak more and more. They were isolated words at first, always related to the people he liked the most: Daddy, Sophie, Anna, teacher, Nancy. But the name he most liked to say was Marky. Whenever the garbage truck passed, he would shout from the window, "Marky, friend!" And the sanitation worker always replied, "Hi, Timmy. How's school?" "Good," the boy shouted back. These little conversations through the window became the most anticipated moment of the day for both of them. One Saturday, Richard decided to surprise Marky and Isabella. He organized a barbecue at home and also invited some families from Timmy's school. "Marky, I want you to meet the parents of Timmy's friends," said Richard when the sanitation worker arrived. "Doc, are you sure? These are people from a different social level than mine." "Marky, you're my friend, and friends don't have social levels." Helen, Sophie's mother, was one of the first to arrive. When Richard introduced Marky, she greeted him warmly. "So you're the famous Marky. Timmy talks about you a lot." "Really?" Marky was surprised. "Sophie told me it was you who taught Timmy to be brave enough to speak, that you always waved to him and made him feel special." "I was just being kind. Sometimes that's all a child needs, someone who is kind to them." During the barbecue, several mothers talked with Marky and were impressed by his wisdom about raising special needs children. He shared tips about patience, creating communication codes, and accepting differences. "Did you know that Marky works from 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon to be present in his daughter's life?" commented Richard. "Such dedication," said one of the mothers. "Nowadays it's rare to see fathers so involved." "And he still finds time to bring joy to other children like Timmy," added Helen. Marky was moved by the recognition. He had never seen himself as someone special, just a father doing what needed to be done. That day, something magical happened. The children all played together, regardless of their differences. Timmy, Sophie, Isabella, and other children from the school created a game where everyone communicated through signs they made up on the spot. "Look at that, Marky," whispered Richard. "They're creating their own language." "It's beautiful to see. Children aren't born with prejudice. We're the ones who teach it to them." "And how do we unteach it?" "By showing them that differences are normal, that everyone is special in their own way." During the afternoon, one of the parents approached Marky. "Hey, my company needs a mechanic. Didn't you say you used to work in a garage?" "Yes, I did, but now I'm a sanitation worker." "The pay would be much better, and the hours are flexible. You could still take care of your daughter and earn more." Marky was interested but hesitated. "It's just, if I leave garbage collection, I won't pass by Timmy's house every day anymore." Richard joined the conversation. "Marky, if this opportunity is good for you and for Isabella, don't worry about us. We're friends now. We'll see each other all the time." "Are you sure, Doctor?" "Absolutely. In fact, I was thinking of proposing something to you." "What?" "How about you and Isabella moving here nearby? There's a little house for rent on the back street. Isabella and Timmy could go to school together." Marky was speechless. "Doctor, I can't afford rent in a neighborhood like this." "Who said anything about you paying? I'm thinking of renting the house and letting you stay there. In return, you could help me with a few things around the house. It would be a fair arrangement." "What kind of things?" "Oh, you could teach me how to work on engines, help with household repairs, and most importantly, keep teaching me how to be a better father." Marky was moved. "Doctor, you're already a much better father than when we first met. Only because of your example. You taught me that love isn't giving a child everything they want, but giving them everything they need. And what did Timmy need most? To be accepted for who he is, and you're the one who showed me that." 3 months later, Marky and Isabella moved into the house on the back street. The transition was wonderful for everyone. The children played together every day after school, and Marky became a sort of uncle to Timmy. The sanitation worker got the job at the garage and could pay for Isabella's treatment without any difficulties. Richard discovered that he really enjoyed working on engines and started helping Marky on weekends. "You know, Marky, "I never thought I'd be happy with my hands dirty with grease," commented Richard one Sunday afternoon. "It's different when you do it for pleasure, right? Not out of obligation." "It really is. In fact, I have a proposal for you." "Another proposal?" laughed Marky. "How about we open our own garage? 50-50 partnership." "Doctor, are you joking?" "I'm serious. You have the technical knowledge, I have the capital. Together we can build something really good." "But doctor, I'm just a—" "You're my potential business partner, and more importantly, you're my friend." The garage opened 6 months later, in a warehouse near both houses. Peterson and Johnson Garage, a name that represented the union of two families who found each other through the friendship between a special child and a sanitation worker with a big heart. Timmy and Isabella loved spending afternoons at the garage, playing among the tools and helping their fathers. It was an environment full of joy, honest work, and true friendship. 1 year after the garage opened, on a Friday afternoon, something special happened. Timmy, now 7 years old and speaking better every day, approached Richard while he was working on an engine. "Daddy, can I tell you something?" "Of course, son." "Thank you for letting Marky be our friend." Richard stopped what he was doing and looked at his son. "Why are you thanking me, Timmy?" "Because before I was sad and alone. Now I have friends, I go to school, and you play with me." "And what changed all that?" "Marky. He taught me that I can be happy being different." Richard hugged his son, moved. "You know what Marky taught me, son?" "What?" "That you were always perfect just the way you are. I was the one who needed to learn to see that." At that moment, Marky appeared in the garage with Isabella. "Hey everyone, we're here," he announced cheerfully. "Marky," shouted Timmy, running to hug his friend. "Hi champ, how was school today?" "Really good. The teacher said my essay was beautiful." "Essay? You're already writing essays?" "Yeah, I wrote about my best friend." "And who's your best friend?" asked Marky, pretending not to know. "You," replied Timmy, smiling. Isabella approached and hugged Timmy too. "I also wrote about my best friend." "And who is that?" asked Richard. "Timmy. And I also wrote about my second best friend." "Who?" "You, Uncle Richard, because you took care of my dad when he needed a friend." Richard was moved. He had never thought he had become important to Isabella too. "And now we're all one big family," said Marky, hugging everyone. "A different family," added Timmy. "Different how?" asked Richard. "A family we choose, not one we're born into. Teacher Anna said those are the most special families." And so, on a sunny September afternoon, in the small garage they built together, two families who met through the simplicity of a wave from a window celebrated the friendship that changed their lives forever. 3 years later, when Timmy turned 10, the family organized a special party. They invited all the people who had been important on their journey: Teacher Anna, Sophie and her family, the other friends from school, Mrs. Nelson, and even Dr. Harold. During the party, Richard gave a moving speech. "A few years ago, I was a lost father, with a son I didn't know how to love. I thought love was giving expensive things, paying for the best treatments, protecting from everything and everyone. But one day, a simple man drove down our street in a garbage truck. He just waved to my son, and with that simple gesture changed our lives forever. Marky taught me that love is accepting, being present, seeing beauty where others see flaws. He didn't try to fix my son. He just loved him as he was." Today, Timmy speaks, laughs, has friends, goes to school and is happy, not because he was cured, but because he was accepted. And I learned to be a better father not by reading books or paying experts, but by watching a man who already knew that being a father is simply loving without conditions. Marky, thank you for giving me back my son, and thank you for giving me a family I never knew I needed." Marky stood up, visibly moved. "Dr. Richard, you're wrong about one thing. Who gave whose son back was the opposite. Timmy gave me back hope. He showed me that my Isabella wasn't the only special child in the world, and that being different can be beautiful. You gave me a family too. You gave me opportunities I never imagined having. But most of all, you gave me true friendship. And you know what's most beautiful? Our children grew up together without knowing there's a difference between rich and poor, between normal and special. To them, we're just a family that loves each other. Timmy approached the microphone, now speaking clearly, though still slowly. Can I speak too? Everyone applauded, encouraging him. I want to thank, he began, slowly. Thank Marquis for teaching me that I can be happy, and thank my dad for learning to love me just the way I am. But you know what I want to thank you for the most? For giving me Isabella as a sister, because now I know I'll never be alone again. Isabella ran to Timmy and hugged him. I love you too, brother. And so at a birthday party full of love and joy, two families were celebrating not just another year of Timmy's life, but also the birth of a friendship that proved the best things in life happen when we open our hearts to people who seem different from us. The story of the boy who didn't speak and the sanitation worker who waved to him spread through the school, the neighborhood, and then throughout the entire city. It became an example of how simplicity and love can transform lives. Today, the Peterson and Johnson Garage is known not only for its excellent services, but also for being a place where special children are always welcome. Marquis and Richard Peterson created a project where they teach basic mechanics to underprivileged youth, giving opportunities to those in need. Timmy became a communicative and happy teenager who helps other special children adapt in school. His unique way of seeing the world turned into a gift for understanding and helping others who are also different. Isabella grew up strong and healthy, with her heart healed not just by the doctors, but mostly by the love of a family that took her in as their own. And Marquis? He still wakes up early every day, no longer to collect trash, but to open the garage where he works alongside the best friend life gave him. He still waves to all the children he sees on the street, because you never know when a simple gesture can change an entire life. Because sometimes life puts special people in our path, disguised in the simplest forms. And when we have the courage to look beyond appearances, we discover that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in the love we are able to share. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of friendship and overcoming? Do you believe small gestures can transform lives? Tell us your opinion in the comments and share if you've ever had a similar experience. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.